If you truly grasp one truth Christ revealed in the Sermon on the Mount, you will have everything that truly matters. I am not saying you will never face sickness, loss, or difficult days, or that every desire will be fulfilled. I am speaking of what money cannot buy, success cannot secure, and human love cannot guarantee. I mean a peace that does not depend on circumstances, clarity, and the assurance that God has not abandoned you, even on your hardest day. But listen carefully. Many people have read the Sermon on the Mount dozens of times and still missed its central message. They know the words about mercy and loving their enemies. They repeat, "Do not worry about tomorrow." They pray, attend church, and sincerely believe in God. Why then does anxiety still control them? Why can one wound rob them of peace for years? Why do they ask God for rest, then lie awake imagining tomorrow? Why do they know Christ's words, yet act as if they never heard them when the decisive moment comes? The answer lies deeper than it first appears. The Sermon on the Mount is not merely a collection of wise teachings. Every word leads to choices we make each day. When someone wounds us, when no one sees us pray, when fear demands control, and when we can choose mercy or prove ourselves right. Most of these decisions seem far too small to shape an entire life, yet this is where the most important work begins. At the end of his sermon, Christ spoke of two houses and a storm that came against both. Before the rain, they may have looked almost identical, but one stood on rock and the other stood on sand. That is why Christ spoke about anger, private prayer, anxiety, mercy, and love for our enemies. He was not merely teaching people to behave better. He was showing us where sand can disguise itself as rock. Today we will uncover that central message. You will see why one person can possess much, yet fear losing it, while another endures a painful season with peace. Why one wrestles with the same inner battles for years, while another becomes free. You may not receive everything you once wanted, but you can receive the one thing without which everything else loses its meaning. By the end, one question will remain, and it can be answered only about your own life. Where in your life is sand still pretending to be rock? The clue lies in the second builder. He also heard Jesus. He did not turn away, cover his ears, or say those words did not matter. But he did not do them. His house stood on sand. The greatest danger is not always ignorance of God's word. Sometimes we have known it so long that we no longer notice the distance between what Christ says and how we live. You can hear the call to forgive many times and still punish someone you love with cold silence. You can agree that you should not worry about tomorrow, then spend the night imagining everything that could go wrong. You can speak about mercy while waiting for the one who hurt you to get what he deserves. You can know the Father sees in secret and still do good only when someone might notice. You may not even feel hypocritical. That makes self-deception dangerous. It rarely asks you to reject God openly. More often, something quieter speaks within. You already understand enough. You can forgive later. Let the other person change first. Your anxiety is justified. God knows your heart. One act of disobedience will not change anything. And after each decision, the house remains standing. The next morning, life continues as usual, and it seems that no real choice was made. But the choice has already been made. One let Christ's word touch the wounded place. The other let pain rule another day. Both could pray, help others, and be respected. But Christ saw where each had placed the weight of his life. This parable is therefore addressed first to those who already know the truth and may confuse familiarity with obedience. Is there a word of Christ you have agreed with for years, but have still not allowed to change what you do? Sometimes the entire choice lasts only a few seconds. A familiar name appears on your phone. You read the message once, then again. Your finger is already resting above the reply when a word of Christ returns to your mind, a word that is inconvenient to remember right now. You know which sentence would hurt most. You can send it and feel brief relief, set the phone down while continuing the argument inside, or tell God not only what the other person did, but what your heart wants to do now. No one sees the pause. The house does not shake. Nothing in the room appears to change. Yet in that hidden moment, what you heard either becomes an act of obedience or remains only a correct idea. These quiet decisions, not promises made to God in an emotional hour, reveal what your life is really resting on. Outwardly, the two houses still stand together, their difference hidden. Christ will reveal that difference at the end of his sermon. First, however, he will show us the places where we are already building long before we see the result. The first is discovered not in a moment of strength, but in an honest admission of need. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is how Christ begins the Sermon on the Mount. He does not demand that you become stronger, fix yourself, prove your usefulness, or earn your place. He begins with someone who understands that he cannot be his own foundation. That sounds strange in a world that has taught us the opposite since childhood. Hold yourself together. Do not show weakness. Do not depend on anyone. Find the answer before someone notices that you are uncertain. Even a believer can carry this logic into his relationship with God. He may pray while already holding the answer, asking God to strengthen a plan he has never truly surrendered. He comes to God not with empty hands, but with explanations, accomplishments, and reasons he deserves to be heard. Poverty of spirit begins where that inner negotiation ends. It does not say, "I am worthless." It says, "Lord, I will no longer pretend that I can hold my life together without you." This is not self-contempt. It is the truth about being human. You may be experienced, responsible, and strong for others. Perhaps your grown children call when something goes wrong. Others wait for your steady voice when everyone is overwhelmed. You say, "Do not worry, I will figure something out." After years of supporting everyone else, you may begin to believe you must manage alone before coming to God. Prayer becomes the last item on the list. You think, calculate, revisit the same possibilities, and only then say, "Lord, help me." Self-sufficiency rarely announces, "I do not need God." It hides beneath responsibility, caution, and never burdening anyone. We conceal uncertainty and call it strength. Inside, self-justification says, "Find the solution first. Anticipate everything. If you cannot handle this, your faith must be weak." But poverty of spirit does not demand that kind of strain. Christ calls blessed not the one who has convinced everyone that he needs nothing, but the one who has stopped hiding his need from God. The kingdom is not earned after we become more spiritual, confident, and strong. It belongs to those who come with empty hands. Peter learned what that means beside a lake. Two boats stood near shore. The fishermen were washing empty nets after a night that yielded nothing. Jesus entered Simon's boat, taught from the water, then told him to go into the deep and lower the nets again. Peter answered honestly, "Master, we have worked all night and caught nothing." Those are not a lazy man's words. They belong to someone exhausted after honest work, who knows why another attempt seems pointless. But then Peter said, "Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net." Peter did not claim certainty or pretend his doubts had disappeared. He lowered the net again, not because he trusted his own experience, but because Christ had spoken. Peter took up the net he had already washed, pushed away from shore again, and returned to the water that had answered hours of labor with emptiness. Christ's word did not remove action. It changed its reason. Peter's skill had taken him as far as it could. The empty net still told him another attempt was pointless, but experience no longer had the final word. The nets filled so quickly that they began to tear. Peter signaled to the men in the other boat. They came, and both boats filled until they began to sink beneath the weight. But the catch was not the greatest thing Peter saw. He did not merely see unexpected success. He saw the one standing before him. He fell at the feet of Jesus and said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." Beside the holiness of Christ, Peter saw his own poverty. It might have seemed that the moment would end in shame, but Jesus did not turn away or leave Peter beneath the weight of his unworthiness. His answer was brief, "Do not be afraid." Then he called Peter to follow him. When we admit our need, Christ does not humiliate us, leave us in shame, or use our weakness against us. He removes fear and shows us where to go. Peter did not become helpless. He still had to leave the boats, make decisions, fail, return, and learn trust. But he no longer lived beneath the demand to prove he could manage alone. He had another foundation. Poverty of spirit is not the condition of a person who possesses nothing. It is the condition of someone who understands that he cannot give himself the things he needs most. You cannot command your heart to stop fearing, make tomorrow safe by thinking harder, force someone you love to change, return to the past, or uproot years of resentment by willpower. But you can stop hiding this from God. Sometimes the first honest step of faith does not sound impressive. Lord, I am tired of pretending that I am not afraid. I do not know how to walk through this without you. In that moment, the weight of your life begins to rest on Christ's word. Circumstances may not change at once. The answer may come differently than expected. But you are no longer relying only on yourself. The first question is simple. When you do not know what to do, where does your heart go first? Into an endless circle of thoughts? Toward another attempt to anticipate everything? Or to God with the plain truth? Yet admitting your need before God in silence is easier than admitting it beside someone who has wounded your pride. You can ask for peace while still carrying an accusation in your heart. That is where the first hidden crack appears. There is a moment when anger becomes especially dangerous. Not when you raise your voice, not even when everything inside is burning. It is when you tell yourself, I have the right to answer in kind, the right to bring up an old failure, the right to withdraw warmth, attention, and forgiveness, the right to return to what happened again and again because the pain was real. That is when anger stops describing what happened and begins directing what happens next. Later in the same sermon, Christ leads us to the place where humility is tested, not in prayer, but beside the person who wounded our pride. He says, You have heard that it was said, You shall not murder. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. These words can be heard too superficially, as if Christ forbids us to feel pain, be troubled by evil, or speak the truth. But Jesus himself grieved. He saw injustice. He never called evil good. He is speaking about the moment when pain is no longer only pain and begins to become contempt. First we say, what he did hurt me. Then, he acted unjustly. Then, he has always been this way. Before long, another sentence rises within. He is nothing to me now. This is how anger changes the heart. The other person is no longer a human being who sinned or caused pain. He becomes a label, an accusation, a name that makes everything tighten again. Then we no longer want justice alone. We want to see the other person humiliated, rejected, or deprived of something precious. Sometimes this anger erupts immediately. We speak harshly, find the most painful place, and strike there. We send a message that cannot be taken back. More often, anger looks calm. The person stops answering, remains polite but cold, and says, "Everything is fine." He continues to pray, read scripture, and carry on with ordinary life. Yet inside, he repeats the same conversation for years. In that conversation, he is always right. Perhaps you know that conversation. You have explained 1,000 times what the other person should have said, what he should have done, and why he is the one who must take the first step. You have imagined the day he finally understands, admits his guilt, and feels at least a small part of what he made you feel. As long as this conversation remains inside, it seems that you are doing nothing. But your heart is already living as if the verdict has been handed down. This is what Christ reveals. Destruction does not begin with the hand alone. It begins when we deny mercy to another person within our own heart. Pain never brought to God searches for someone to condemn. It returns with every memory and rewrites old conversations until no uncertainty remains. I am right. The other person is guilty. Sand begins to resemble rock. We think we are standing on justice when in truth we are being held by the right to condemn. Then Christ says something even more difficult. He interrupts worship itself and directs the hearer toward the relationship he would rather leave untouched. This is one of the sermon's strongest reversals. You have come before God, brought your gift, and are doing what seems sacred and right. But Christ stops you. Not because prayer is unimportant, but because prayer cannot cover what the heart refuses to obey. He does not tell you to prove that the other person is more guilty, or to go only if you will be understood. He does not promise that one conversation will restore the relationship. He speaks about your step, the part that is within your power before the other person changes. Reconciliation does not require returning to danger or restoring former closeness. Sometimes distance protects a person's life and dignity. But even necessary distance must not become a place where the heart endlessly prepares revenge. David once faced such a choice. His men had stayed near the flocks of a wealthy man named Nabal and had done them no harm. When sheep shearing time came, David sent men to ask for food. Nabal answered with contempt, rejecting David's request and speaking as though David were nobody. David immediately told his men to strap on their swords. 400 went with him. By morning, he intended to destroy every man in Nabal's household. Within minutes, humiliation had become a decision to shed blood. Anger had already given David its reasons. He insulted me. I did good and he repaid me with evil. He needs to learn who he is speaking to. I have the right. Anger first recalls the pain, then offers protection, and finally demands an action that creates new pain. But Abigail, Nabal's wife, came to meet David. She neither defended her husband nor claimed David had misunderstood. Abigail quickly gathered food, loaded donkeys, and went to meet the armed men without telling Nabal. On the hill's descent, she saw David, dismounted, and bowed to the ground. She stopped a man on his way to do what he could never undo. Abigail reminded David that God would preserve him and execute justice. He need not take revenge himself. And here, the balance of power truly changed. 400 armed men stood behind David, swords at their sides. The road had been traveled and the decision announced. One command would complete it. Stopping meant abandoning his own promise of revenge. Nabal remained guilty. The insult remained. Abigail could not restore David's honor. But anger no longer controlled what happened next. David stopped. He acknowledged that God had sent Abigail to keep him from bloodshed and revenge. The armed men turned back. Nabal's household remained standing. David lost the triumph anger promised, but did not carry blood on his conscience. This was victory, but not the kind anger offered. Anger promised strength through punishment. True strength appeared when David refused to let another man's sin choose his response. Your sword may look different. It may be the message you have already typed, the conversation in which you are ready to say everything at last, or the silence you have chosen to punish someone close to you. In that moment, self-justification will sound especially convincing. You have earned the right to answer. Let him feel what you felt. If you do not punish him, he will never understand. If you forgive, you are admitting weakness. But the word of Christ reaches deeper. Do not let another person's sin decide who you will become. The heart begins to find freedom when it stops waiting for another person's confession before obeying Christ. Reconciliation may begin with a long conversation. Sometimes obedience begins more quietly. Do not send the message today. Stop rehearsing punishment. Tell God not only what happened, but what the pain has done within you. Say to him, Lord, I do not know how to forgive this right now, but I do not want this resentment to keep deciding who I am becoming. Christ did not tell you to wait until you felt peace. He said, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Sometimes faith does not begin with a long prayer. It begins with a few steps taken against the resistance of pride. Yet reconciliation does not end Christ's searching question. After pride yields enough to obey, what does the heart still hope to receive? So Christ next leads us to a place with no witnesses, no applause, and no opportunity to maintain a beautiful image, to a closed door. The door closes, and outwardly nothing happens. No one hears whether the prayer sounds confident or whether the right words come. You are alone before God, no longer arranging your face or controlling your voice. There is one thing that can turn even a right action into sand. It is not the action, but its intended audience. We can ask forgiveness while waiting for admiration. We can restrain a harsh word while secretly enjoying the thought that we are more spiritual. We can help someone we love, then spend years remembering how much we did. Everything may look right from the outside, but Christ looks deeper. He does not look only at what you did. He asks whose approval you were living for in that moment. After speaking about anger and reconciliation, Jesus says, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them." He does not forbid good works others may notice. The danger begins not when someone sees you, but when human attention becomes the reason without which goodness feels meaningless. We help and wait for a response. We serve and notice that our name was not mentioned. We care for family while counting how much we gave and how little we received. We pray, but part of our attention remains fixed on the people listening. Do the words sound convincing enough? Does our faith appear deep enough? Goodness becomes a transaction. Gratitude, loyalty, or one sentence is expected in return. We could never have made it without you. When it never comes, resentment rises. Perhaps you know this pain. You helped your children, set aside your desires, and supported family through a season no one remembers. Then one cold remark revealed how easily your sacrifice had become ordinary. A question rose within. Did everything I did mean nothing? Christ does not dismiss this pain. He knows the hurt of being overlooked by those for whom you sacrificed. But if your worth rests on their gratitude, they decide how valuable you feel today. They thank you, and you feel needed. They forget, and you feel empty. Their gaze begins defining the good you already did. That is why Christ says of those who do good to receive human praise, they have their reward. The act may still have helped someone. The hungry were fed, and the needy supported. But if admiration was the goal, the reward ended with the praise. We can do more good while growing more resentful. Self-justification whispers, "You deserve their gratitude. After everything you have done, they owe it to you to remember. If no one noticed, your sacrifice was wasted. At least let them know what it cost you." Christ offers another kind of freedom. Do good before the Father who already sees. He says, "Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Do not keep a private record of merit. Revisit every sacrifice to prove what others owe, or use mercy to demand, "Now you must love me exactly as I want." An act done before God does not become smaller because people forgot it. Its meaning was never held in their memory. Then Christ speaks about prayer. When you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place. The closed door removes the audience. You need not appear calmer than you feel, choose impressive words, or prove your faith remains unshaken. There you can tell the truth. I am tired. I am jealous. I am still angry. I fear for my child. I do not understand your silence. I say I trust you, yet I am trying to hold everything together. Many believers understand this only after years of faith. You do not need to put your heart in order before showing it to God. Christ speaks of your Father who sees in secret. This is not the stare of an inspector from whom you must hide. It is a presence in which you no longer need to pretend. You do not have to make yourself visible in order to be seen by God. In 1 Samuel, Hannah had been unable to have a child for years. She came to the house of the Lord in deep sorrow. Eli sat near the entrance while she wept and prayed. Her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. The priest saw her moving lips but heard nothing. Judging by appearances, he thought she was drunk. Even here, in a place of prayer, Hannah's pain had been misunderstood. She did not defend her reputation with a long speech. She answered, "No, my lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit." She was not drunk. She was pouring out her soul before the Lord. Eli said, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition." The child was not yet in her arms. No evidence had appeared. Yet Hannah left, ate, and her face was no longer sad. She was misjudged by human eyes, but she was fully seen by God. This is the heart of secret prayer. Not performing, not searching for flawless words, but bringing an unguarded heart before the one who sees beyond appearances. Private prayer may not change circumstances immediately, but we can return to the same life no longer alone. The burden remains, but it no longer rests on our shoulders alone. Christ then warns that even fasting can become performance. Giving reveals whose gratitude you seek. Prayer shows whether you can be honest without an audience. Fasting exposes whether devotion proves your spirituality. These are not three separate rules. All three uncover one question: whose approval is shaping the life you actually live? Before people, life becomes an effort to maintain an image. Strong, kind, faithful, grateful, and calm, even when everything inside says otherwise. But before the Father, the performance ends. There you stop saying, "Everything is fine," when peace is long gone. You stop proving your worth by the amount you have done. You stop assuming an unseen sacrifice was a wasted sacrifice. Perhaps you need no great act today. What is asked of you may be invisible. Close the door, remove distractions, and stop explaining why you were right, why the other person was wrong, or why you should have done better. Say only, "Father, you see me." Do not demand beautiful feelings yet. Do not try to impress even yourself. Your good has not vanished because it was unappreciated. Your pain matters even when misunderstood. Your prayer is not weaker because it has few words. You can know the Father sees you and still leave the room to find the same old anxiety waiting, counting what you have and living as though safety depends on what you can hold. Christ now deepens the question. It is no longer only, "Before whose eyes are you living?" It is also, "Where is your treasure?" The answer is easier to find than it may seem. Think about what occupies your mind at night, when the house is quiet and you no longer need to appear calm. What are you most afraid of losing? Health? Money for the years ahead? Your familiar home? Your children's love? The ability to remain needed? The assurance that tomorrow will follow its usual order? Your treasure is often found there. A treasure is not simply something you love. It is something from which you begin to demand this promise: "Assure me that I will be all right." Christ says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Treasure is not always kept in a bank or safe. Sometimes it bears a loved one's name. Sometimes it is health, family respect, a familiar home, or independence. Christ asks a deeper question. What must remain beside you for your heart not to lose its peace? That question can reveal what was hidden. A man believed he simply loved his family. Then an adult child pulled away, and his sense of worth disappeared with the closeness. He believed he was simply responsible about health. Then one troubling test result revealed that his confidence in the future rested on his body. Here Christ reveals something unexpected about anxiety. Sometimes we worry not because we possess too little, but because we demand too much from what we possess. We ask money for more than food, medicine, and shelter. We demand that it guarantees safety. We ask health for more than the ability to live and work. We ask it to promise us many more years. We ask someone we love for more than love. We demand that the person never change, leave, or disappoint us. Money, health, and love were never made to carry that weight. They are precious gifts, but become dangerous foundations when we demand what only God can give. That is why Christ says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal." The meaning of his warning is simple. Do not ask something temporary to give you an eternal guarantee. Everything earthly can change. Bodies weaken, possessions wear out, money is lost, people leave. A home once filled with familiar voices can become quiet. If the heart has fastened its peace only to what can change, it will live in constant fear. Anxiety always returns to the same question: what will happen if I lose this? You review expenses, make plans, call the doctor, and seek advice. Then something changes. The decision is made, but your thoughts keep circling. The door is locked, yet you check again. The doctor has not called, but your heart has already lived through the worst news. The thoughts return to the same place, promising, think longer and you will gain control. Control does not increase, strength decreases. While our thoughts circle tomorrow, the day God has already given can pass almost unnoticed. Christ says, "Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on." These words must not become a cold command to someone unsure how to pay for medication, find work, or help family. Jesus does not shame need. The people on that mountainside knew the cost of food and clothing. Their concerns were not abstract. Tomorrow could be difficult. Christ does not tell them they have no reason to feel afraid. His words restore another truth. You are not alone inside this need. He points to birds and lilies. A bird searches for food. A flower grows where planted. Neither tries to hold the world together by its own strength. Christ restores the knowledge anxiety makes us forget. You were not created to be your own heavenly Father. Israel learned this in the wilderness, where every morning raised the question of bread. When the dew lifted, something like frost remained. The people asked, "What is it?" Moses answered, "This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." Each gathered what his household needed. When the sun grew hot, the manna melted. Some kept a portion until morning against God's command, and it spoiled. On the sixth day, the meaning changed. At God's command, the people gathered twice as much. The same stored manna now remained good for the following day. The problem was not the supply. The same action could be an attempt to seize tomorrow without God, or an act of obedience. What mattered was not the bread in their hands, but trust in its giver. Every new day asked one question: will your peace rest on the bread you managed to preserve, or on the faithfulness of the one who gave you bread today? This does not glorify passivity. The people gathered their food just as you can work, plan, seek help, and make hard decisions. Care does what can be done today. Anxiety demands that today's bread guarantee nothing painful will happen tomorrow, a power no human being possesses. Christ asks, which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? This is not a rebuke, it is a release. No sleepless night can make tomorrow more obedient. Yet anxiety can steal today's bread, today's conversation, today's prayer, and today's peace. The heart does not become captive when it makes a plan. It becomes captive when it says of any gift, "Without this, my life no longer has meaning." Sometimes we see this dependence only when a familiar support begins to move. A job ends and worth disappears with income. Children build their own lives, and a parent wonders, if no one needs me the same way, who am I? This discovery can become mercy. God does not delight in loss, but he does not want a gift crushed beneath a weight it was never meant to carry. Loss remains loss. Pain remains pain. Fear may return, but we can say, "Lord, I thank you for this gift. I will no longer demand from it what it cannot give." This returns every gift to its proper place. After speaking of birds and lilies, Christ says what an anxious heart finds especially difficult to receive. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. He does not say tomorrow is unimportant. He says tomorrow has not yet been given to you to live. Today has its own bread, its own faithful choice, and its own mercy waiting to be received. You will live tomorrow only when tomorrow becomes today. Christ does not demand that you solve life in one evening. He returns you to the nearest faithful action. Make the call, ask for help, open the feared letter, and do not judge what has not happened. Anxiety demands the entire map. Christ gives enough light for the next step. Then he says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you." Here the opening promise unfolds. All these things shall be added to you does not mean every possession, relationship, or desired outcome. It returns earthly gifts to their place. None must pretend to be God. To seek the kingdom first is to ask within every need not only, "How can I escape this problem quickly?" but also, "Lord, how can I remain faithful to you as I walk through it? How can I keep fear from making me cruel? How can I refuse to trade truth for a sense of safety? How can I stop demanding that someone I love fill the place that belongs to God? How can I keep mercy when I am afraid?" If these quiet studies of Scripture help you walk through difficult seasons, subscribe. Let the next word of Christ find you on the day you need it most. But anxiety does not remain private. A frightened heart sees people as threats, tries to control them, demands behavior that preserves its peace, and grows cold when they refuse. The real pressure begins when your peace seems to rest in another person's hands. He does not apologize. He does not admit how deeply he hurt you. He continues speaking as though you were the one at fault. A very understandable desire rises within. Let him feel at least some of what I had to endure. At that moment, Christ speaks words that cannot be obeyed by willpower alone. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." He also calls the peacemakers blessed and says, "Love your enemies." David's story showed what pain can do within a few minutes, but what happens when the blow has already fallen and someone carries it for many years? Joseph faced that question. His brothers sold him into slavery, taking his home, freedom, and closeness with his father. Then they returned with Joseph's blood-stained robe and let their father believe he was dead. Years passed. One day the brothers came to Egypt looking for food. They did not recognize Joseph, but he recognized them. Everything changed. The men who had destroyed Joseph's former life now stood before him, and he held their fate. The wound was old, but the choice before him was new. If no one heard me, I will stop hearing others. If I was denied warmth, I will become cold. If I was betrayed, no one can be trusted. Pain offers a kind of protection that slowly hardens into character. Joseph could have seen only traitors. We often explain our own failures as a hard day, then treat someone else's failure as proof of character. We ask for another chance while reducing others to their worst act. Joseph had reasons for anger, years of memory and power. He tested his brothers, and gradually their change became visible. One brother offered to stay behind in place of the youngest, so their father would not endure another loss. A man who had helped sell his brother now offered his own freedom to save a younger brother. Joseph saw no excuse for the past, but he saw evidence of change in the present. Unable to restrain himself, he ordered everyone out and wept so loudly the Egyptians heard. The room emptied, but his weeping passed through the doors. The brothers still did not understand why this ruler looked at them as though he knew the story they had tried to bury. He said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The brothers could not answer. Before them stood the brother they had sold and believed gone forever. Every excuse collapsed in one sentence. The man who knew the truth now held their fate. But Joseph's first action was not to summon the guards. He called his brothers to come closer. The power they feared was not used for revenge. Here, peacemaking stops being a beautiful word. A peacemaker neither hides the truth nor turns it into a weapon. Joseph revealed his name, acknowledged the past, and still invited those who had betrayed him to come closer. Peacemaking does not create instant trust. The brothers stood in fear. You cannot force another person to trust your intentions, but you can refuse to use that person's fear as a chance to triumph. Later, after their father died, the brothers became afraid again. They believed Joseph would finally take revenge. Then he spoke words in which mercy did not hide the truth. "Do not be afraid. You meant evil against me." He did not say everything worked out and no longer mattered. Selling a brother and deceiving a father were evil. The lost years were real. Mercy need not rename evil before refusing revenge. Then Joseph added, "But God meant it for good." God's purpose did not excuse theirs. It meant evil was not given the right to write the final chapter. They had changed the course of Joseph's life, but they could not decide who he would become. They could not take God from him or force him to continue their cruelty. Joseph went further. He promised to provide for them and their children, using power that could destroy them to preserve their lives. Here the command, "Love your enemies," ceases to be abstract. Joseph did not merely refuse to punish them. He used his authority to preserve the lives of the people who had once treated his life like a thing they could sell. Love for an enemy does not erase necessary boundaries. It removes the desire to become like the enemy. You can seek protection without dreaming of revenge and call a lie without rejoicing when the liar falls. Mercy rarely begins as a warm feeling. It can begin as a decision not to pass the pain forward. This is what mercy does to a chain of evil. It stops the chain in one person and says, "You did evil to me, but I will not allow your evil to keep living through me." Your enemy may not stand before you as Joseph's brothers stood before him. It may be a name you struggle to speak calmly, a photograph you no longer want to see, or a message you reread in order to feel entitled to your resentment again. It may be someone you see every day, yet your heart has remained closed beside that person for years. Do not promise God feelings you do not yet have. Do not claim you have forgiven if the struggle is still alive within you. Begin with the truth. "Lord, you see what this person did to me. I will not call it good, but I do not want what he did to rule my heart any longer." This can be the first act of mercy. Do not send the response today. Do not repeat to your children the words that once wounded you. Do not search for one more person who will assure you that you are completely right. Reconciliation may not happen quickly, and the relationship may never become what it was. But obedience to Christ does not have to wait for the other person to change. Another danger now appears. After rejecting open hatred, we can keep a quieter form of superiority. "I did not take revenge, I forgave. Therefore, I am better than he is." Mercy that leaves you standing above the guilty person has not finished its work. You may no longer wish him harm, yet still see all his faults clearly, while barely noticing what is happening in your own heart. So Christ turns our eyes away from the enemy and toward the plank in our own eye. There is a sign of sand that almost always looks like rock. We can see clearly what is wrong with everyone else and rarely question whether our own vision is clear. We notice another person's pride, coldness, and ingratitude. We remember exactly who raised his voice first, who broke a promise, and who refused for years to admit fault. The more obvious the other person's wrong appears, the harder it becomes to ask, "What is happening in me right now?" Christ directs one of the most uncomfortable warnings in the Sermon on the Mount to this very place. "Judge not, that you be not judged." These words are sometimes treated as though a believer may no longer distinguish good from evil, as though a lie cannot be called a lie, or destructive behavior cannot be called destructive. Christ does not forbid discernment. His question exposes what can distort it. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? The plank rarely looks like a plank to the person carrying it. It comes under more respectable names. I am simply principled. I understand people. I have life experience. I am defending the truth. Someone needs to tell him what he is really like. But behind that certainty may be an old resentment, fear of being deceived again, contempt that no longer permits an explanation, or the need to remain right at any cost. Someone sees the harshness of his adult son, but does not notice that for years he spoke to him only in commands. The speck in another person's eye may be real. Christ does not deny it. But the plank in our own eye changes how we see it. Resentment enlarges one failure and erases everything else. Pride hears disrespect in every disagreement. Fear interprets awkwardness as a threat. Here is the truth easily missed. Christ tells you to remove the plank not so that you will stop seeing the other person's speck. He says, then you will see clearly. Repentance does not make us blind. It restores clarity to our vision. Then we can call evil evil without enjoying the role of judge. We can set a boundary without humiliating another person. We can enter a hard conversation beside others, not above them. We enter knowing that our own hearts also need mercy. Before a difficult conversation, the questions you ask God may matter more than the perfect words you prepare. What in me wants to help, and what in me wants to win? Am I using truth as a weapon? These questions do not make evil less serious. They keep your heart from adding its own pride to another person's sin. But someone may conclude, if I must not judge, then I must not discern anything at all. Words about mercy can then become an excuse for blindness. Christ does not teach that kind of blindness. He warns about false prophets and says, you will know them by their fruits. Love does not discern by appearances, impressive words, or promises. It looks at the fruit. A tree cannot explain forever what kind of tree it is. Sooner or later, what grows on its branches becomes visible. The same is true of us. We can speak about love while leaving those closest to us in constant fear. We can speak often about truth while using it only to put others in their place. We can talk about peace while punishing our family with coldness whenever they disagree. Fruit is not revealed in one beautiful speech. It appears over time. Sometimes the fruit becomes visible only after someone has left the room. The door closes. No one at the table speaks immediately. One person lowers his eyes. Another slowly exhales. A third is still choosing words that will not provoke another outburst. The person who spoke about truth is no longer present, but the result of his presence remains. Has the room become safer for honesty, or is everyone still studying one another's expressions? Did the weak person straighten his shoulders, or did he leave feeling even smaller? It is easy to ask this about someone else. Christ returns the question to the person listening now. What fruit remains after me? Not what I intended to produce, not how I explain my motives. What gradually grows in the people who live near me? Fruit does not mean perfection. Someone building on rock still makes mistakes. But one recognizable sign appears. That person returns to the truth. He does not defend his failure to the end. He can say, I was wrong here. Fear was ruling me here. I used truth to win, not to help. That return is itself fruit. It shows that failure has not become the final authority over the heart. This is where the words about the narrow gate take on special meaning. Enter by the narrow gate. These words can be frightening. It may sound as though Christ is describing an entrance reserved for a few unusually strong people who have reached some rare spiritual height. But the gate is not narrow because Christ is reluctant to receive people. For our lives, it means this. You cannot carry through it the right to remain unchanged. You cannot enter while clinging to your own infallibility. You cannot ask God for mercy while declaring that another person has forever lost the right to receive it. You cannot call Christ Lord while reserving the final decision about which of his words you will obey. The broad way offers a more comfortable form of faith. Listen only to what comforts you. Explain your own actions by circumstances. Treat the actions of others as proof of bad character, and use grace as permission not to change. The narrow way begins differently. Lord, without you I do not see clearly. Without you I easily turn pain into accusation. Without you I can speak the right words and still bear bad fruit. This is not the path of someone trying to earn the kingdom by his own strength. It is the path of those who are poor in spirit. They enter without proof of their righteousness, willing to let Christ change what they could not see within themselves. But the warning now grows sharper. We can know the teaching about the plank, learn to recognize fruit, find the narrow gate, and even explain to others where it stands. We can call Jesus Lord, and still never make his words the foundation of our lives. Christ says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven." These words leave one question unresolved. What will be revealed if a correct confession never becomes a lived obedience? Christ answers not with another explanation, but with the final image of his sermon. Before his listeners, the two houses appear again, one on rock and one on sand. But now the sky above them is growing dark. Throughout the Sermon on the Mount, Christ spoke about decisions that rarely seem large enough to become the foundation of an entire life. He spoke of the word not spoken in anger, the prayer no one heard, the choice not to let fear drag tomorrow into today, and the mercy chosen when there was every reason for revenge. Each act seemed small. The house remained standing, the sky stayed clear. No one could see what was happening beneath the surface. At the end of the sermon, however, Christ returns us to the central question. Where have you placed the weight of your life? On your own righteousness? On the approval of other people? On health, money, or someone you love? On your ability to anticipate every danger? Or on his word? Christ says, "Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock." The wise man also heard the words, but he did not stop after understanding their meaning. The word became an action, not his entire life all at once, not one grand decision, the next act of obedience. When the time came to reconcile, he did not wait for the other person. When anxiety demanded a complete guarantee, he chose today's bread. When no one was watching, he stood before the Father without performing. When pain gave him permission to return evil, he refused to pass the pain forward. Sometimes he failed. Sometimes he became afraid again. Sometimes he discovered the crack only after saying or doing something he regretted. But he returned to the word of Christ. This was the difference in his foundation. Not perfection, not constant confidence, but a willingness to let what he had heard become an action again. Then Christ says, "The rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house." Do not imagine one sudden blow. Imagine pressure steadily increasing. First the rain strikes both roofs, then the water rises against the walls. Then the wind beats against the houses again and again. Every new blow tests what lies beneath the visible structure. In that moment, the beautiful exterior decides nothing. The whole house must answer one question: what is beneath it? That answer cannot be invented in the moment of impact. The storm came to the person who built on rock as well. Faith did not keep the sky above him permanently clear. It did not exempt him from loss, close the door against sickness, or force the people he loved always to remain faithful. Christ did not promise a life without wind. He revealed a foundation able to carry the weight of the storm. One day the storm touches the very place on which a person depended most. News arrives that makes old plans meaningless. The person without whom you could not imagine the future leaves. The body no longer obeys as it once did. Or your own understanding of yourself collapses. I thought my faith was strong. I thought I had already forgiven. I thought I could handle this. On such days, the storm does not create a new foundation. It reveals what that life had been resting on all along. You can tremble and still stand on rock. You can weep and still not be abandoned. You can have no idea what tomorrow holds and still not lose the one who will be with you tomorrow. The house stood not because its owner was stronger than the wind. It stood because it had been founded on rock. But another house stood nearby. Its owner had also heard the words of Christ. He may have agreed with them, repeated them, explained them to others, and sincerely admired the depth of what Jesus said about prayer, mercy, and trust in God. But each time the word required action, he found a reason to postpone it. Forgive later. Admit he was wrong after the other person moved first. Entrust tomorrow to God after everything became clear. Remain alone with the Father when more time was available. He did not reject Christ openly. He simply kept the words of Christ away from the place where his life actually rested. This is how sand preserves its deceptive resemblance to rock. Until great weight is placed upon it, the difference can remain almost invisible. We can live beside the Word of God for years and mistake familiarity for obedience. We can know where the rock is and continue building where it is more convenient. Then the rain came to this house. The floods rose, the winds struck, and Christ said, "It fell, and great was its fall." The fall was great because more than walls collapsed. The man's confidence that correct words had been enough collapsed with them. But Christ tells this parable before the storm, while both houses are still standing, and a crack can be seen not only as a threat, but also as mercy. One final question remains. If building on rock means hearing the word of Christ and doing it, what exactly is the rock? The answer does not begin with another attempt to become stronger. Christ never asked you to become your own rock. The rock is not your perfection, the strength of your faith, or your ability to withstand the storm. The rock is Christ himself. In the parable, building on rock means obeying the word of Christ. Later, the Apostle Paul reveals the depth of the image. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. These truths cannot be separated. The word of Christ does not exist apart from Christ himself. To build on his word is to give him the right to speak in the places where you have always reserved the final decision for yourself. It is not merely admiring what you heard. It is allowing his voice to enter fear, resentment, shame, and the hunger for human approval. Everything Christ asks of you in the Sermon on the Mount, he embodied in his own life. He did not return evil for evil. He did not turn away from those who came in shame. He did not seek human glory. In the face of hatred, he remained faithful to the Father's love. In Gethsemane, he did not hide the weight of what was coming. He prayed while the disciples slept nearby and said to the Father, "Not my will, but yours be done." On the cross, while he was being mocked, he prayed, "Father, forgive them." Christ does not stand outside your storm as a distant observer. He entered the deepest darkness a human being fears. He knows what it is to be abandoned by friends, to carry pain in the body, and to wait through a night when heaven seems silent. And death could not hold him. Your foundation is not an idea about Christ. It is the living Christ who entered death and rose again. The storm may touch circumstances, the body, and human relationships, but it cannot make him less faithful. You will have everything does not mean everything will remain with you. It means that when everything else begins to move, Christ will remain with you. He knows your name. He knows what you have hidden for so long. He knows the place where you are tired of being strong, and the word you have heard for years but have been afraid to obey. If one word of Christ has refused to leave you during this entire message, do not dismiss it as a passing thought. Perhaps that is the very place being uncovered today, the place you learn to hide even from yourself. Perhaps this message brought several things to mind. The resentment you called justice, the anxiety you called responsibility, or the good works for which you expected gratitude. Perhaps you remembered a word of Christ you praised, but never allowed into the place where obedience would cost the most. Do not turn this discovery into another reason to condemn yourself. Christ did not tell the story of two houses so that you would frantically prove your walls were still in good condition. He told it before the storm. The crack you see does not have to become a sentence. It can become the place where pretending ends and truth begins. Even what you fear you recognize too late does not mean the years behind you were wasted. It can become the place where you stop defending the old life today and allow Christ to begin with the truth. You do not need to rebuild the entire house before coming to him. You do not need to bring flawless faith, an unstained history, or a finished answer. Bring him the place where you no longer know how to stand. While his word speaks to you today, you can still answer. Not with a perfect life or a promise never to fail again, but with the next honest act. Sometimes the first step does not look like victory. It sounds like an honest confession. Lord, I cannot carry this alone any longer. Teach me to place this weight upon you. Sometimes it is the decision not to send the angry reply, to finally tell the truth in prayer, to ask forgiveness, to stop demanding the impossible from someone you love, to make the call or accept the help you have refused for too long. You do not need to see the entire road. The foundation has already been laid. The house is still standing. That is not proof of its strength. It is mercy, because today the weight of your life can still be placed upon Christ. When the wind rises, do not measure your faith by the strength of your own fingers. Do not ask first whether you are holding tightly enough. Look at Christ. He did not promise that rain would never come. He said the house built on rock would stand. Write in the comments, "Christ, be my foundation." These are not words about never feeling afraid again. They are a confession of where you want the weight of your life to rest. Let the final word of this message be not the sound of the approaching storm, but the name of the rock, Jesus Christ.